Good morning and welcome to another edition of United Way for Southeastern Michigan's What's the Word Wednesdays. My name is Courtney Howe, and today we are going to be talking election info with All Voting is Local. 2022 is a big voting year. Every member of Congress and the state legislature is up for re-election. Due to our new redistricting process, many of the district boundaries will look a little different. With so many issues at stake, we want to make sure that you have all the information needed to hit the polls in August and November. As a reminder, we'll reserve at least 10 minutes for questions at the end, so please put your questions into the chat box on Zoom or into the comment section if you're watching on Facebook. We are joined today by Aghogho Adevbie, the State Director of All Voting is Local, an organization committed to removing barriers to the ballot box and fighting to build a democracy that works for everyone. Before joining All Voting is Local, Aghogho worked as an attorney for Wayne County. He has been actively involved in voter protection efforts since 2010, primarily recruiting and organizing fellow attorneys to be poll workers and poll watchers on Election Day. Prior to becoming an attorney, Adevbie spent time in Tanzania, where he taught at St. Peter Claver High School and climbed Mount Kilimanjaro. A Detroit native, Aghogho has a bachelor's degree in political science from the University of Michigan and a Juris Doctorate from the University of Michigan Law School. Aghogho, thank you so much for joining us today. It's really a pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great to be with you, Courtney, and with the whole entire United Way family to talk a little bit about elections today.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to get started. We have a lot of questions. I know we have a lot of discussion about August 2nd and in November. So a lot of content we need to cover today.
Yeah.
First thing I want to ask, can you tell us a bit about the work All Voting is Local is doing to preparing for upcoming elections?
Yeah, thank you. Well, so All Voting is Local is committed to dismantling barriers that might prevent somebody from being able to vote. And that can range from making sure that your clerk is sending out an absentee ballot on time to you so that you have enough time to research the issues, research the candidates, and vote. It also ranges from us. Recently, we put together a set of standards that we released with the Brennan Center to lay out what poll workers can and cannot do so that we ensure that poll workers are actually serving the community during election day and the days after if the counting takes time. So it just really ranges from a number of different activities that are all focused on ensuring that people have the right to vote.
Wonderful, wonderful. And I would like to learn more about All Voting is Local. When were you all established? How can people find more information?
Yeah, so All Voting is Local was established in 2018. And it has now expanded to 8 different states. And if you want to find out more information, you can go to allvotingislocal.org to find out more information about the work that we do in Michigan, but also the work that we do in the 7 other states as part of our countrywide organization.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. And again, everyone who is watching, the link is going to be in the chat box or on the Facebook link there. So thank you so much. So going back to your work focus is largely on removing barriers to the ballot box. Can you discuss a bit more about what those barriers are and what they look like?
Yeah, so one of the things that we constantly come up with in the last couple of years is making sure that people have actual access to every single method of voting, especially absentee voting. In 2016, only 26% of Michiganians voted absentee. That number jumped all the way to 60% in 2020. So we've really seen a huge change in voter behavior, and clerk's offices and the Secretary of State's office have really worked hard to keep up with this new mood in the electorate. But that has had some growing pains. So we work closely with our coalition partners across the state to keep in touch with clerks to ensure that people have true access to the absentee ballot process. It can also range for issues in individual communities. Some communities have a lot of resources, a lot of funding to appropriately fund their elections, and there are other communities that don't have as much. So we work with those communities to figure out how we can make the best out of the resources they have, but we're also have advocated for the legislature and other governments in our state to provide more funding for clerks. So those are a little bit of a taste of kind of some of the issues and some of the barriers that we see affecting voters today.
Thank you so much for that information. I really appreciate it. We're also, again, talking about this year and how 2022 is such a big election year. While every election is important, can you tell us why the August primary is so important to participate in?
Yeah, no, it is. This upcoming primary is extremely crucial. We just had our redistricting process. So every 10 years, the lines for the state house, state senate, even some of the county commission seats, and the congressional districts are changed to reflect population growth and population changes. And those effects, the first election under those new maps takes place this year. And because of that, those maps are good for about 10 years. And with the power of incumbency, someone who gets elected this year is likely to be in their seat, their congressional seat for the next 10 years, and in their state house seat for the next 6 years, or their state senate seat for the next 8 years. So there's a lot of power in what happens this year. And in many of the districts that are drawn, they are either safe Democrat or safe Republican. So the primary really determines who is going to be the member of the legislature or the member of Congress for the foreseeable future. So it is extremely important that if you want to say and the direction of your community in one of these seats, that you vote in these primaries. They typically have low turnout. That's unfortunate. But if people get involved and vote during these primaries, they can have a real say in the direction of their lives at the governmental level.
Absolutely. I'm glad that you brought that up, because historically, even before COVID and, 2020 election, our primary numbers for voting participants have always been extremely, extremely low. So again, this is a great time for us to exercise our rights and to do that. So thank you so much for mentioning that. And I know you mentioned about absentee voting. So again, absentee voting has become increasingly popular as, again, we're talking about COVID and how our behaviors have changed since the pandemic. But there is a narrative that it isn't safe or secure to absentee vote. Can you discuss a little bit about how the absentee voting process works and why voters should feel comfortable and empowered to vote absentee?
Yeah, the absentee process is extremely secure. I know that the narrative out there is that it's not, but that's just false. So when you want an absentee ballot, you actually have to request it. Nobody will randomly send you an absentee ballot unless you want one. You have to request it. So you get a absentee ballot request form from your clerk's office. It could be a community organization or a candidate. You can also request an absentee ballot online via the Secretary of State's office, and you'll be sent an absentee ballot. But in that process of requesting it, you have to sign your name. And that signature is compared to the signature on file. Now, people are wondering, well, how is my signature on file? Well, if you have a driver's license or a personal state ID, when you applied for those state IDs, you had to sign your name. And that is stored in the qualified voter file, which is a central database throughout the state that stores all of this information. So your signature has to be compared to that for the application. And then once you receive the ballot and submit it back, your signature is once again compared to that signature on file. So it's compared twice. And then once that process is done, that the ballot is received, the signature is verified. And I will just a real quick note, if there's something wrong with your signature, the clerk is mandated by law to reach out to you within 48 hours or as soon as possible to say, hey, there's something wrong with your signature, to verify. Usually our signatures change there's no big deal. But if there's something wrong, it alerts the authorities that there's something that needs to be investigated, and that does happen from time to time, unfortunately. But once the signature is verified, it goes through a counting process, and the election inspectors, the poll workers, the first thing they do is verify that the clerk has verified the signature. If it doesn't, it goes back to the clerk's office. Then they realize, they look at the ballot stub to see that the ballot stub matches a number on file. Then the ballot is opened up. Then the ballot is tabulated. So there are a bunch of security safeguards to ensure that the ballot that you submit via absentee ballot is yours. And also, drop boxes are also extremely secure. Under the law, they have to be monitored by electronic surveillance, by video cameras. All the drop boxes in Detroit are monitored by video. And there are some exceptions, like in Sterling Heights, for example, all their drop boxes are outside of fire stations. So they're monitored by the fire department 24/7. So they're really secure. It's a great way to vote. And you can also track your ballot online at mi.gov/vote. So you can see it, that it's been sent to you, and you can see that it's been received by the clerk's office to be counted. So it is a really secure way for people to vote, especially when we're all busy. People have to go to work, they have to raise their families, and giving them the flexibility to vote from home is extremely important.
I appreciate that you mentioned that. Personally, I am election poll worker myself, and so I have to vote absentee. And I know that one of the things, the different stipulations for this election, that they mentioned that for voting stipulations, that it's a straight ticket. Can you kind of talk about what people can maybe expect on their ballots, maybe in general, or what that straight ticket means and look like? A lot of people have questions about it because different elections allow different things.
Yeah, so there's not straight ticket for the primary because we're determining who becomes the nominees for each party. Yeah. So on the ballot for this August, there's a Republican section and there's a Democratic section. Only vote in one party's primary. You cannot say, I'm going to vote for the gubernatorial candidate, the governor candidate in the Republican Party, and then vote for the congressional candidate in the Democratic Party. If you want to vote in the Democratic Party, you have to vote for all Democratic candidates. And if you want to vote in the Republican primary, you have to vote for all Republican candidates. If you don't do that, it invalidates your ballot. Now, in November, if you want to vote only for Democrats or only for Republicans, you can simply vote straight ticket, fill in that bubble for either party or the other minor parties, and you're done with the partisan section of your ballot. Then there's a nonpartisan section for judges, for proposals, etc. That's a separate section that you have to fill in the individual bubbles or boxes, depending on the community that you live in. And even if you vote straight ticket, if you say in November, this is the distinction, in November, you can fill in for one party, Republican or Democrat, but decide, oh, for this minor race, for the state rep race, I really like the Republican in this race, so I'm going to vote for that person. You can do that. So there is relatively straightforward. There's directions are on top of the ballot. You can also ask your poll worker, election inspector for help. They are more than willing and they're trained to give you that assistance. So don't be afraid to ask, but just want to reemphasize for November, just vote in one party's primary.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that clarification. We're also weeks away from our primary election. Can someone still vote absentee for the August primary? And kind of what are those even mailing deadlines if you want to mail your absentee ballot in?
So I would strongly encourage everyone, if you want to vote absentee, if you want to vote early, to go to your clerk's office during their normal business hours or on the last weekend of the election. Under the Constitution of our state, you have a constitutional right to have available to you up to 8 hours of time at your clerk's office on the Saturday or Sunday. It depends on the community, but the clerks have to post that information ahead of time. So given mail times, it's just best at this point, now that we're less than 2 weeks away from the election, to go to the clerk's office and get that absentee ballot.
That is extremely, extremely helpful. If someone plans on voting in person, what are the things that they need to know before they go? How should they prepare?
Well, it's important to go to the polls prepared. Some people, they come with a sheet of all the candidates that they know they want to vote for. You can go to the League of Women Voters website. I think it is vote411.org. And they actually give you a sample ballot, and there's a little description on each race and what the candidates stand for, and there's a biography. So you can do some real research there. I advise everybody just to write down who you want to vote for ahead of time. Also, bring your driver's license or state ID. It makes the process easier for the poll workers. But if for whatever reason you forget your driver's license or you forget your state ID, you can fill out an affidavit attesting to who you are under penalty of perjury. So it is, just make sure ahead of time to bring your ID and to know who you're voting for.
That is extremely helpful. If someone has a problem voting at their polling location, again, we're talking about in-person voting. If someone has a problem voting at their polling location, what should they do, or who should they contact?
Yes. So one of the things that I would just want to emphasize ahead of time is go to the Secretary of State's website. That's mi.gov/vote. I think there's also a link in the chat here. Is go to that website and figure out where your polling location is so that you know where to go. If you don't, you can always contact its 866-R-VOTE. And this is a nonpartisan website or nonpartisan telephone number that is manned by election volunteers 24/7. If someone's not there to take your live phone call, they will call you back. And you can ask them for questions and for help on finding your correct polling location. If you have moved within the last 30 days before the primary, you can go to the clerk's office, register to vote at your new address, and vote in person at the clerk's office absentee. And they will take your ballot and count it that day.
That is extremely helpful. And again, everyone go into the chat functions and look at all the resources that we're providing everyone, talking about these resources and links and websites. They are in the chat function and also on Facebook. So thank you all so much. If people are wanting to volunteer and really get more involved, I know that, again, we talked about working the election poll, being those workers. Can you talk about other opportunities, including that, and how people can really get involved this election season?
Yeah, so thank you for volunteering to be an election inspector. That's wonderful. We need everybody. If our democracy only works if we all participate in it. And that means different things for different people. For some people, the best that you can do is vote. I encourage everybody to vote. If you have more time, you have more flexibility, be a poll worker, and you can go to Democracy MVP. That's a program with the Secretary of State's office, and sign up to be a poll worker through that program. But each party also has the ability. You also have the ability through each party to be a poll challenger, and that is really a person who is, simply there to make sure the election is running well, independently, and if there are issues, to contact their party, so that they can talk to the clerk to make sure that things are corrected. So you can contact the Michigan Republican Party or the Michigan Democratic Party to be a poll worker for one of the partisan organizations. We also, at the same time, with All Voting is Local, with our partners, also have an ability to have some nonpartisan poll challengers at the precincts. So you can contact me. I think our contact information is actually on, if you go to the allvotingislocal.org, I think there's a page where you can find like a general email address for organization to email us about how to get involved in those opportunities.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing those volunteer opportunities. I know a lot of people are wanting to get their hands dirty and really be grassroots and be a part of the work. So we really appreciate you providing those resources to us.
Yeah.
We have a question if for voters, can I still vote if I was convicted of a crime?
Yes. If you have served your time and you are no longer in prison, you are
It looks like Aghogho has frozen for a bit. He should be hopping back on very shortly. But again, I want to direct everyone to some of the resources that are in the chat function here. Again, if you want to get more involved in the election protection, you can contact All Voting is Local at allvotingislocal.org. And again, they have opportunities for you to volunteer and participate and really learn about all things elections within your local areas. So again, thank you for that. And we also have on the screen here, election protection hotline information and with different languages. So please, if you are needing assistance with any questions about the elections or absentee voting or any of that, please call those hotline numbers. And I want to, all righty, I think we lost Aghogho, but again, I really appreciate Aghogho for joining us today. It's been a very, very fruitful conversation, and we appreciate, oh, Aghogho, I think you're back. And you're on mute, but you're back.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. We're here.
Internet issue. I don't know which part I got caught off on, but I was just reiterating that if you've been convicted of a crime, you can vote as long as you're not while serving a sentence. So if you've been convicted but not sentenced, you do it. If you are awaiting trial, you can still vote as well.
That is extremely helpful. Thank you so much. I know that's very helpful for many of our viewers. I do also want to ask another question about absentee voting. Is there a way people can track their absentee ballot?
Yes, I'm going to off camera just to preserve bandwidth. But yeah, if you go to Secretary of State's website that referenced before, there is a tracking feature there. Also, individual communities also use a program called Ballot Tracking, which is, Detroit, they use Ballot Tracks, and it actually shows, and can actually send you a text message of the time from when you requested the ballot, they prepared the ballot, they sent the ballot, be getting to your apartment, and then it also going back to the clerk's office. And there's actually an initiative, there may be an initiative on the ballot in November that would mandate ballot tracking for communities all across the state.
Oh, wonderful. That's extremely helpful. And again, that resource was Ballot Tracks, everyone. So Ballot Tracks. Thank you so much for that. And my last question that I have, again, coming from our viewers, someone asked, I have a disability. So what should I do if my voting location is not accessible?
Yes, and that I'm really glad that you brought up that question, because it's something that I think is unfortunately unclear under the law at times, and unclear to a lot of different voters. So, number one,
Aghogho, I think you froze again. Are you able to hear me?
to get.
Wait a minute. Are you there, Aghogho?
I'm here.
All
Can you
right.
hear
Okay,
me?
great. I can hear you now. If you could, that's wonderful. If you can start over for us and talk about the accessibility for our voters with disabilities, that'd be wonderful.
Yes, yes. So
It looks like Aghogho still having internet problems. We're all experiencing still. But again, I will ask that everyone please contact Aghogho directly if you have any more questions. And again, he can be reached at their website at allvotingislocal.org. And again, he's very accessible, so please reach out to Aghogho Adevbie. And so we appreciate you, Aghogho, for so much for speaking to us and sharing all of your knowledge that you have with us. So again, thank you for joining us.
yeah, I don't know if I'm back. I heard you.
Yes, you are back. So
Okay.
I know we're nearing the close of today. So Aghogho, if people have any other questions, how can they contact you?
Yes, you can email me at aghogho@allvotingislocal.org. That's probably the easiest way to get in contact with me.
Okay.
Also, just visit our website, and we'll be certain to point you in the right direction. But just want to mention that one thing about disabled voters. If you would like to vote at your polling location and you don't want to vote absentee, you have the right to ask an election inspector to come out to your car and give you a ballot. So that's something that you can do. They also have the right to request within the last 72 hours of an election that a clerk personally deliver an absentee ballot to you and pick it up.
Oh, wow. That's extremely helpful. And I did not know that information. So they can just go to their local clerk's office and make those arrangements?
Yep, just call the clerk and say, I need someone to deliver an absentee ballot to me. But that's only within the last 72 hours.
Okay, less 72 hours of the election. That is extremely helpful. Aghogho, and I'm so glad that we were able to reconnect. So I really appreciate that information. And again, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much.
Absolutely. And before we go, everyone, as a reminder, for everyone in our community who may be experiencing a need, our 211 helpline remains available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And this includes resources like cooling centers, many of which are open this week, as is going to be a hot one. We'll drop a link to find your nearest cooling center. We always maintain a running list of available services in the community and can connect you to the support that you need. You can also look up resources in your area by using our 211 resource database at unitedwaysem.org/211. We will return on July 27th to discuss mental health equity. You can visit unitedwaysem.org/virtual town halls to stay updated on our upcoming topics and watch replays of previous town halls. That website is also included in the chat box. So again, thank you everyone for joining us today. We will see you soon. Stay safe and continue to live united.